From Joe Rogan to Ben Shapiro to Graham Stephan to Grant Cardone, a lot of people are in the news recently for moving out of high-tax blue states and moving into tax-free and red states. And when I was on Fox Business Channel recently being interviewed about my ideas for going where you're treated best, I was asked, if you're living in California, why not just move to Nevada? And today I'm going to tell you what I believe you should consider before you move to a red state and before you move to a new state to lower your taxes. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and here at Nomad Capitalist, my team of over 30 people and our network of global experts, I've spent over a dozen years curating, help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs, the types who are fleeing high-tax blue states right now. We help them go where they're treated best. And so when I was on Fox Business, I made a very simple claim. I said, my 5 magic words are just that. Go where you're treated best. They are not, go where you're treated a little bit better. And so a quote that comes to mind is from Robert Kiyosaki, who's speaking at our Nomad Capitalist Live coming up later this year. He says, the easy days are over. You have to be smart now. And there was a time when it was very easy to simply move out of California and go to Nevada. And there were even people who actually really physically lived in California, but they had everything on paper in Nevada, and they got away with it for a while. Now the easy days are over, and I believe that the question you have to ask yourself is, am I going where I'm treated best if I am moving? You know, one of the things that I think about when it comes to moving is, for many people, moving is stressful. For me, it's always been pretty easy. I'm the guy who goes in, I buy a house, doesn't even have lighting. Within 7 days, I've got lights installed, I've got furniture, I've got art hanging in the wall. I thrive on getting things done quickly. But I know a lot of families and friends of mine who, when they move, it's months of unpacking, they got the big moving truck, it's a real production. And so what I've said for some time is, if you're going to be moving, you might as well move. Because why are the reasons that people tell me they don't want to go overseas? What I told Fox Business was, let's say you're in California and you're paying 50% tax as an entrepreneur. You're going to move, as Ben Shapiro did, to Tennessee. Maybe now your tax is 43%. Or you're going to move as Grant Cardone did to Florida. Maybe now it's 42%, right? And so, yes, potentially you have some more freedoms because California and some of these blue states have been really egregious in reducing people's freedoms. But you know what you're doing? You're also following a lot of people who are going there, who are driving property prices in places like Nashville and Austin and Miami through the roof. Potentially, you know, you're going to have a hard time in the future selling those properties as work in the U.S. and other Western countries becomes increasingly distributed and people potentially have the opportunity to move out of cities. And so I think that the property prices are being driven up in places that people wouldn't otherwise go to. But here's the thing. If you're going through all that hassle to move, and you say that you can move to Nashville, but you can't move to somewhere offshore, what are the reasons people tell me? Well, the kids, where would they go to school? How do kids go to school? Well, kids go to school the same in Kuala Lumpur or Panama City or London or Singapore that they do in Nashville, that they do in Los Angeles, right? They have schools everywhere. People are being educated. And by the way, the U.S. does not exactly rank that high in terms of scores on tests or in terms of education metrics, so perhaps they could get a better education somewhere else without the high property taxes that you pay in some of these tax-free states like Texas. But you know, that's one issue. What about friends? What about family? Well, if you're moving to Nashville, sure, you can take a flight, and maybe it's a little faster to fly back to Los Angeles or San Francisco, but is it really that much faster than flying from Costa Rica, from Panama, even from Kuala Lumpur, right? Are you that much closer? And so all the reasons that people say that they can move to Tennessee or Florida for a little bit lower taxes, to me, would be the same reasons that you could move anywhere in the world. You have flights, you have Skype, you have Zoom, you have internet, you have everything that you need. And if you're going to be making a change, if you're going to move, I've always said, you might as well move. Why move a little for a little benefit when you can move just a little bit more? And to me, it comes down to psychology. There's something for people that feels closer. Now, sure, it's the same country, they speak the same language, but you know what? Again, they speak the same language in London, in Dublin, in Singapore, in Hong Kong in many cases, in Belize. You can pay a heck of a lot less tax living in one of those places. I'm talking like reducing the tax bill by 80% or even more, depending on your numbers, by moving to one of those places. And by the way, there are places where English is not the official language, where English is widely spoken, where you would be living. But the issue is really just a psychological one where that seems so far. But I think for a lot of folks, if you're from Los Angeles, London might feel like a better cultural fit than somewhere else in the United States. Now, obviously, as more people from California move into Texas, to Tennessee, to Georgia, to these states, those states will increasingly become even more cosmopolitan. And so you'll have plenty of other California exiles to hang out with. But, let's face it, states in the United States have their own cultures. And so I think some people might be better served living in a Dublin or a London, potentially working their way towards a second citizenship, which I think is another good diversification strategy if you ever needed to leave the U.S. because things totally got crazy. But that aside, the idea that maybe it's a better cultural fit, maybe it's easier to make one-stop flight from London to L.A. than figuring out how to get to Nashville through Denver or through Houston or from wherever to go to Los Angeles. But the big issue for me is people are moving out of blue states and they're not going where they're treated best. They're making minor improvements. And worse than that, the changes are potentially temporary. We've talked recently about the new vote in Arizona, what voters approved in November, where they have now put a big extra tax on anyone making over $250,000 a year. Not even politicians in California are going after people who make so little. But in Arizona, there's a big new tax. If you make over $250,000, you're going to pay about 8% in state tax at the marginal rate. That's hardly a low-tax state. Now, Arizona has become a blue state now, voted blue for president, 2 blue senators, and I believe they have a slight blue advantage in terms of House of Representatives. So there's a state that was solidly red. I should know. I lived there for many years. And now it's blue. How long before, well, Georgia's blue too, at least they voted for Biden. How long before other places become, if not entirely blue, more blue, as people bring their policies from California and places like that with them. And so you still have all the federal mandates, all the federal regulations, all the federal restrictions. Certainly, states do have some powers in the U.S., and you may have an advantage being in Tennessee versus in California. But would you have a bigger advantage being somewhere in Latin America or in Asia or in Eastern Europe? I happen to think you would, and I've lived in the U.S. and I've lived in many other countries overseas, and I can tell you I feel dramatically freer. And what you can argue with, you can argue about my feelings, but what you can argue with is I legally reduced my tax rate to the single digits, and now to essentially 1%. And so, if you're saying I want to save some money, I'm tired of these crazy California taxes, well, guess what? The top federal tax rate has been anywhere from 37 to 39.6%. Back in the Bush years, 35%. So you take that, you take Social Security, you take Medicare, you take all the taxes. You're not paying low taxes. You're just, cutting some off the edge. And so if you're able to move, if you can leave your family, if you can leave, the kids' school, if you can make all those changes, then you might as well move. And there are plenty of places where you can be treated a lot better, more freedom, potential second passport for diversification, potentially more investment opportunities, potentially better schools, and a heck of a lot lower taxes. Now, in some of these cases, you need to do some tax planning. You might need to make an investment to get in. Certainly some of the highbrow countries that everyone wants to go to, it's not going to be as cheap to get in. You might need to buy some bonds. You might need to buy some real estate. You might need to do who knows what. But there are countries like Portugal and others in Europe, like some in Central America, like some in Southeast Asia, Singapore being one, where depending on how much you want to invest, you can get either a good life or an amazing life that's equal to what you have with more freedom and lower taxes. And you know what? With the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars every year that you'll save, you can take a couple of your kids' friends, you can take your parents, you can take your parents-in-law, you can take your siblings, your cousins, whomever, put them on a plane business class, charter a jet and fly them to come to you. How much does it cost to charter a jet from LA to Belize? You put everybody you know, you fly them down, you'll still come out way ahead. And it's really no different than going to Miami, in my opinion. So before you go to a red state, consider, how much of this move where I'm constraining myself to staying within the United States is only because it feels comfortable, because I don't know any different. I was there many years ago, and I can tell you that without anyone like Nomad Capitalist helping me way back then, I was able to adapt and I was able to manage. I'm a married guy, I have kids in the future, my lifestyle is not changing. I'm not magically going back to the United States the minute I have a child. This is my lifestyle for the rest of my life. And so I want you to ask yourself, what is it that makes you think that Panama or Belize or Dublin or Lisbon or Singapore or Bangkok is not just as viable of an option for you as any of the places that you're looking at going? And I think when people ask themselves that, they'll realize either your objectives aren't saving money, maybe it's just, something else. But if it is about money, creating generational wealth for those kids, giving them an extra $10 million by the time you're done to either go to charities or benefit your family or build your business bigger to give to your kids, whatever. I think if that's your real goal, you will realize that the only thing standing in your way of moving to a temporarily red and temporarily low tax state is a fear of the unknown, which is exactly what we've made over 1,000 videos helping people to relieve themselves of. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.